So a group of employees that play a huge part in the success of the UFC but often go unnoticed are the commentators, so I thought I'd give them their own little award ceremony here at the end of 2020. These are my top 5 commentators of 2020 in the UFC. I'm going to start at number 5 and end with the best commentator of 2020. Starting with number 5 though on my list, and there are going to be some honourable mentions here at the end where I will talk about the commentators that have kind of slacked off a bit this year and have slipped out of the top 5, but we're going to start with number 5 on my list, and this was a very, very competitive position because I could juggle out a bunch of different names here, but I've settled on one. I believe that Dan Hardy deserves a position in the top 5 commentators of the year in 2020. I've settled on Dan Hardy. I know you guys know that I have my indifferences with Dan Hardy in the way he conducted himself during the whole Herb Dean situation. He went after Herb Dean on the commentary, and some say that was very valiant of him to stand up for Jai Herbert on the ground and try and protect the fighters, but I feel like it was a little bit unprofessional, especially getting in Herb Dean's face afterwards. Make the call out originally to say that this should be stopped, but then don't go up to him afterwards behind the scenes and get out of your desk and take it. It was a little bit unprofessional, but I still like Dan Hardy's commentary. Yes, he's a little bit biased at times, and yes, he does ramble on about some absolute nonsense at times as well. Like, I'm watching a fight here, Dan Hardy. I don't need to know about Hannibal of Carthage. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a little bit too much sometimes with Dan Hardy's stories and ramblings, but he's a very good commentator behind that, and he genuinely does love the fight game, and I think that's a huge factor with these commentators, because a lot of them this year, you can kind of tell that a lot of these commentators aren't really into the fight game anymore. They don't seem to be giving huge reactions. Like the color commentators give a little bit more energy when there's a big finish, but Dan Hardy, you can tell he still loves the game, and I can also tell that Dan Hardy is He's very grateful to be there cage side and watch the martial arts take place. He's a true martial artist in that way. And even though I have had my differences with the way Dan Hardy's conducted himself here and there, especially afterwards with the Herb Dean situation, going after him on YouTube, then taking that video down where he basically showed every single bad Herb Dean call in his career, I thought it was a little bit weird. But Dan Hardy, in terms of pure commentary, he's really good. He has had some slip-ups, but I think overall Dan Hardy is a solid commentator, and his love for the game is still there, which I love, and his reactions to finishes might be the best on this list, other than one other person in my top 5, but Dan Hardy, you can tell when a finish happens, he loves it, and he loves the game of MMA, and that's why he's in the top 5. Moving on to number 4 in my top 5 list, that man's name is Daniel Cormier. I've had my differences with him as well, but he's number 4 on this list. The last 2 events, 255 and 256, maybe it's just because Joe Rogan was there with him and it kind of brings his level of commentary down a little bit, but Daniel Cormier slacked off towards the end of the year, in my opinion. Wasn't the best on commentary, was very biased in certain situations, especially towards Brandon Moreno. We noticed he was scoring razor close rounds that could go either way with Figueiredo and Moreno, actively scoring them on commentary for Brandon Moreno. I thought that was very weird for a commentator to do, but still, Daniel Cormier is a great commentator. I love the wrestling knowledge that he spills on everyone every now and again, because we don't really have that person on the commentary desk. We've got Dominick Cruz, who knows a lot about stuff. You've got Joe Rogan, who knows his things here and there. You've got other guys that have their expertise areas in the game, but not a lot of pure wrestlers like Daniel Cormier on the commentary desk. I like having him there for that reason, and he breaks down the wrestling very well in fights. And I just like that sometimes when they're in the clinch, we can have a guy on commentary that's telling me about the head position, and that's telling me about the over-unders. That's telling me what a guy needs to do to stop a guy from taking him down. It's good to have that knowledge on the desk. I like Daniel Cormier's commentary. The last few fights of the year were a little bit weird, but then again, I think him being at number 4 mainly is because of him saying she just punched her right on that thing on her forehead whenever Zhang Weili was taking on Ioane and Jacek. But Daniel Cormier sits at number 4 on my list, but now we move on to the top 3 commentators of the year, and this is, in my opinion, the A-team of commentators, and I think they should be a duo. These people should be a trio for the pay-per-view events from now on, in my opinion. Michael Bisping sits at number 3 on my list, and I'll get to 2 and 1 in a second, but Michael Bisping, at the start of the year, I was skeptical. He was a little bit off. He was a little bit weird. He was calling out certain things in the Poirier versus Hooker bout where, you know, don't tell Dustin to watch his neck in the middle of a fight, you know what I mean? And he does have, at the start of his career, Michael Bisping seemed to have a few different lines that he would say over and over again. One of them would be, wow! Another thing would be, oh my word! Another thing would be like, watch your neck, Dustin! He has a couple of lines that he kept saying over and over again in these fights. I liked it. It was a little bit repetitive at the start, but he's really turned things around, and now it seems like he's definitely in his element with the commentary. And now I've seen other commentators do their job towards the end of this year. It made me value Michael Bisping because, as I said with Dan Hardy, he loves the game. You can see he's got the biggest reactions whenever there's a finish that happens. He's shocked every time. It's good to have that energy on commentary. He's got some humor here or there. Sometimes at the start of the year, as I said, that humor would be a little bit in the wrong moments, but I feel like now he's found his little moments, his pockets of inactivity in a fight where he can slide in some of his humor and tell some stories and give us some background information on the fighters. Michael Bisping has turned things around in commentary as this year has gone on. Start of the year, I was like, have they made a mistake with bringing him in? Then towards the end of the year, he really turned things around, and I think that puts him at number 3 on this list. I love Michael Bisping on the commentary, but now we move on to number 2, and that number 2 is Jon Anik. He is number 2 on my list. I think him, Bisping, and number 1 on my list should be the trio for the pay-per-view events. Anik is already a member of the pay-per-view events. I like Jon Anik, man. I really do. And I feel like he's one of the better color commentators now. Than I know he used to be the guy that just reads out different things and tells us what round it is and how many strikes have been scored and tells us what he thinks about the strikes being scored and then asks a question to the color commentators. But I was watching Figueiredo versus Moreno. Jon Anik was reacting to the shots landed by Figueiredo more than DC and Joe Rogan were, and Jon Anik was actually like, you can see him trying to step out of his role as the guy who just reads out the statements to us and does the advertisements. And you can see him start to venture into the color commentary and reacting to the finishes. He has some of the best sound notes that he comes out with, or sound bites that he comes out with, that are great for promos. Every single time there's a finish, you saw it with Stipe Miocic. We didn't see many reactions to the finish of Stipe Miocic against Daniel Cormier from Joe Rogan and what's his name, Dominick Cruz. Didn't see any reactions from them when Stipe finished DC in the ring, but Jon Anik, despite DC being his friend, still came out there and gave us a great soundbite at the end. Stipe Miocic is a heavyweight champion, and once again, the division belongs to him. He seems to be able to separate himself from his biases and still commentate the same way, regardless of who's in the cage. I like Jon Anik. I love his reactions. He's stepping into more of a color commentary role. I think he needs to stop sucking up to DC and Rogan, because I'll tell you this, out of the A side, Jon Anik, you're the A. You know what I mean? You ain't the B or the C of the commentary anymore. We need Jon Anik around to glue everything together sometimes. But number 1 on my list is a guy who has been a great commentator for a while. Started on the Contender Series, ended on the Fight Nights, now he even jumps in on some pay-per-views, and I'd like to see him jump in for all of the pay-per-views from now on, because I think he is the best commentator hired by the UFC right now. Paul, the Irish Dragon Felder. Paul Felder is a great commentator, brings the color commentary, has some good moments as well where he's commentating and then he goes backstage to corner for one of his teammates, or he's due to be commentating an event and then he turns around and he's fighting RDA at that event. Like, there's just some different situations that go above and beyond being a good commentator. I think that's what Paul Felder represents. He's never rambling over the top of something happening. He is always reacting to the moments in the fight. He never lets a guy land big shots, but continues his point over everything else by telling us, like, where the name Imanari roll came from in the first place, all the way back in the Tibetan mountains. We don't need to hear any of that stuff. Paul Felder knows this, reacts to the fights very well, and gives his perspective as well on how he thinks the fights are going, what weaknesses he sees the fighters employing, and he seems to be right a lot of the times with his predictions in fights. So Paul Felder, great commentator. I like that he started on Contender Series. He was great on Contender Series, and so did Michael Bisping start there as well. So it seems like it's a great place for new commentators that were fighters to learn the commentary. That's a little bit of a less important position rather than headlining pay-per-view straight away. Felder has stepped up. I like Paul Felder. I think he's the best commentator of 2020. By far, Paul Felder takes the biscuit. The Irish Dragon reigns supreme. Anik at number 2. Bisping at number 3. DC at number 4. Dan Hardy at number 5. And now we get to our honourable mentions. It's not really an honourable mentions. Sorry. Let me pronounce that word correctly for the first time this video. This is more of the shame group. Because, as I said, with the top 5 funniest fighters of the year, there's so many funny fighters, and they're already separated from the rest of the batch. So the honourable mentions are still a great thing to get. But this is kind of like the rest of them, the other 5. Dominick Cruz, in my opinion, sits at the top of it. But some problems I have with Dominick Cruz's commentary. It's good, it's really good, but the saltiness reigns through every single bit of commentary, and you're supposed to be a little bit unbiased here, Dominick Cruz, but when I am watching Daniel Cormier hug on to Stipe at the end of round 2 after Stipe drops him, and you are just letting the salt loose. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's just, these are problems in commentary. You've got to be unbiased, you've got to be switched on, and don't take anything outside of the cage into it. And Dominick Cruz is saying things like, good job on the referee for giving DC the time that he needs at the end of a championship round to survive. Obviously, he's salty about his own stoppage. Keeps bringing it up in fights as well. Great job on the referee to notice that the fighter was still in there. Always the saltiness comes through from Dominick Cruz. I like it at times, but I think it's a little bit unprofessional, but he is great on commentary anyway. Of course, he had the moment in the McGregor-Habib fight where he was saying that McGregor is basically letting the punches happen. He doesn't express his points too well at times, even though I know the meaning he has behind them. I think he needs some practice, maybe in 2021 with the saltiness removed, and maybe if he overall, who knows? Maybe Casey Kenny gets like an early stoppage win over him, and then it's just off the deep end and he just doesn't even want to commentate anymore. But I think if he separates himself from the fight game fully, he will be one of the better commentators on the team. But right now, he's at the top of the losers. Second on the loser list, or just I'm going to bundle these people together, John Goodman, Trevor Whitman, Brendan Fitzgerald. Staples of the commentary, don't really go above and beyond anything like the other commentators do. They aren't really as well known as the other commentators. Of course, Trevor Whitman kind of needs to be removed from that because he's not really a commentator. He's just a little bit of information on the side. I like Trevor Whitman's position. I think he actually, you know what? Out of the loser list, Trevor Whitman. Trevor Whitman is the only honourable mention because he's not a commentator. He's a little side piece, so he's not going to do as much work as the other commentators anyway, so I shouldn't put him with the losers. He's an honourable mention because I like having Trevor Whitman's voice in there sometimes, telling us about the coach's corner advice. I like it very much so indeed. I think he's a worthy addition to the sound team in the UFC. Trevor Whitman's a good job. But Brendan Fitzgerald, John Goodman, staples on the commentary, but now we get to the fucking loser of the fucking commentators, Joe Rogan. And this is going to get dislikes because I know just people online rim job this man around the world. He's not a good commentator for the UFC. And he kind of embodies all the things that I had wrong with the other commentators. Like the rambling over the fight is so annoying. He doesn't react to the fight well anymore. Don't get me wrong, I used to love Joe Rogan screaming, "Ow!" But now it's just different, you know what I mean? There's only so many times I can hear someone scream a vowel before I start realizing that that's the only thing they bring to the table, and that can be done by anyone. I don't think someone can come into the UFC and take DC's commentary job and give us the breakdowns of wrestling that DC does. Don't think they can give us the personality of Michael Bisping. That's going to be hard to find. Anik's professionalism. Felder, with the all-round, in my opinion. No one can really replicate that. But Joe Rogan can be replaced by a guy who screams the word "oh" and says, "Look at this," or "What's going on here? But look at this, but oh, but look at this, but oh, but ah, but it always hurt." I know that there are thousands and thousands and millions of people around the world that can say those 3 lines over and over and over again on commentary. And Joe Rogan, I'll tell you this, last 2 events, he ruined them. He genuinely ruined them. We left the Shevchenko-Maia fight talking about the commentary. We left the Figueiredo-Moreno fight talking about how great the fight was in the first place, but also talking about the commentary. I can't go back and rewatch Figueiredo versus Moreno myself that many times because Joe Rogan's commentary bias genuinely ruins it for me. There's a moment at the end of the 5th round where Figueiredo is raining down shots on Moreno in the end of a 5th round, in the 5th round of a 5-round war. And Rogan is dead silent, man. It's blatant bias that he has in fights. I think it's disgraceful. He has a huge underdog bias. You saw the way he worked the Chase Hooper fight as well. I understand it was a comeback win, but Chase Hooper was not getting destroyed in that fight, and Joe Rogan made it seem that way and just basically tore apart the technique of Chase Hooper in that fight, which I thought was quite savage for a guy who's trying to develop his skills in the UFC, 21 years of age. Thought it was a little bit out of center for Joe Rogan to critique the skills of Chase Hooper the way he did. But still, Joe Rogan, a commentator in the I think he needs to be fired, man. I think he needs to be fired. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Don't need him anymore. Another guy can make vowels, noises. Another guy can scream. Another guy can say, this guy's one of the best in the world. Another guy can say, look at this. Another guy can turn to someone in the commentary, and I'm going to say these 2 lines. And the fact that you guys know what these 2 lines are going to be, you know that there's a problem. Hey, did you guys know where the Imanari roll came from? It's one line of Joe Rogan's. Every fucking pay-per-view we hear it. Every fucking pay-per-view. Another line of Joe Rogan I know you're going to hear. Are they still using those steel Muay Thai cups? Every fucking pay-per-view, the guy he asks answers the same thing. Yes, they are. And what do you know? Joe Rogan comes back with a response. You know that can give you some leverage on the armbar, right? I feel like I've heard everything Joe Rogan knows about MMA. It's very clear that he doesn't watch the sport anymore because he doesn't have any new information to give us about anything. I think he's run his course. He's got millions in the bank. I don't think we should have a commentator that doesn't fear his job being taken away. I think there's a real valuable asset in the business world to have a worker that needs their job. And to have a guy that doesn't and can say, I don't even want to do that event, I'm just going to do the ones that are close to my home in America on the pay-per-views and get paid the most money, I think is a waste of an investment. Get someone else in there, and I think the new A-team for the UFC should be Paul Felder, Jon Anik, Michael Bisping, Daniel Cormier, subs in and out of those guys. I think that should be like the quadruple of great commentators should be Felder, Anik, Bisping, Cormier, rotating themselves in and out of the pay-per-view events. Then have Dan Hardy, Dominick Cruz, Fitzgerald, Goodman, Whitman, obviously he's going to be on the side, but Fitzgerald, Goodman, Hardy, Dominick Cruz, working the fight nights with a mixture of a Felder here and there, or a Bisping here and there, or a DC here and there, depending on how big the fight night is, of course. Thank you for watching the video. Those are my top 5 guys, and hopefully you agree with me. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Goodbye. See you later. Toodle, Pip, Felder #1. I think he's the best commentator there is. Goodbye.